Tonight, from Washington, D.C., Firing Line, with William F. Buckley, Jr. Tonight's guest, Barry Goldwater. Tonight's topic, the future of conservatism.
My guest today is a gentleman from Arizona who didn't quite almost become President of the United States, but the next thing to it, if you follow me. He is indisputably the best known, and perhaps for that reason the most maligned, conservative in the world. During the campaign in 1964, he was maligned by his professional detractors, painted into a bogeyman, which amply attests to the imaginative ingenuity of the public relations industry. Senator Goldwater is both a Republican and a conservative, terms which he has not found, or at least not yet found, to be mutually exclusive. Firing Line was never conceived as an interview. It was conceived, and indeed the original contract specifically called for an exchange of opinion. The idea was that a conservative position on many matters of public policy tends to be ignored or trivialized in a mighty communications industry wired to the pressure points of contemporary and even trendy American liberalism. Accordingly, the producers thought, why not experiment and see if a conservative view of current affairs could survive the battering week after week of expert proponents of the left. Perhaps the conservative view would collapse, the structural frailty of it having been finally exposed, or perhaps the public would tire of it all and protest the affront of an entire hour given over to serious conversation. In fact, the press and energetic audiences were enthusiastic about the idea of sharp yet civil exchange.
Let me say one thing to you. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm thinking so. What were we talking about?
Well, you were saying about why they went after you.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking ahead of myself.
Right.
See, you're a wise man, and you make a man think.
Did that ever happen in the ring?
No, boxers don't think as fast as you. They're slow.
Is it becoming sort of chic in some quarters to be a traitor as a sort of...
Well, I think it is in a way, because it's a form of dissent. But in any case, I think that the real feelings that people get out of reading the Philby books are annoyance at the establishment. They're great bricks to throw at the establishment. And I throw that brick myself.
You know, for years there'd been this newspaper legend that had grown up about me, which was overblown and anomalous. And funny, it was ridiculous. You know, it had me as some sort of a savage, barbaric version of Hemingway. You know, and in fact, I'm half the man's size, and physically, and probably in literary ways as well. And I just felt that it's part of the madness of America. You know, for years I felt that the greatest trouble with this country is that it's insane. Not the people, but the social mechanisms of the country are insane. Oddly enough, we'd agree on half the social mechanisms that are insane and part company altogether on the others. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I felt, one of the tiny things that I felt it was certainly insane about was me. Mm-hmm. Now, everyone has the idea, because I write about myself all the time, I think I'm enormously important. I don't, but it's the one thing I really do know something about. You know, it's the one thing I claim to be an expert on, is myself and my own intellectual adventures.
Mm-hmm. Bill, where did you get those figures on the elasticity of demand? Is that another exaggeration?
I got them from a study published by your colleagues in Harvard.
It's not an absolute assurance of accuracy.
Are you referring to your former students? I believe that without advertising the fact, the people in the faculty at Yale, in fact, don't hire people because they simply don't like their points of view. Unhappily, I think that tends to happen very often because they don't like their points of view because they're Christians or because they're Friedmanites.
I don't really think that's fully fair and responsive to the.
Well, it's certainly responsive.
No, I don't think it's just not fair.
It's neither fair nor unfair.
It's not responsive to reality. It's responsive to something else. But I really don't believe that that's the case. I believe that human beings, being what they are, have convictions and ought to. I don't believe that I do believe that there is such a thing as academic freedom, and that I don't believe it's violated instinctively and as daily as your statement implies. I don't believe that at all, sir. No.
I mean, I suppose.
Well, I'll put it this way: when I was at Yale, 26 out of 26 members of the political science faculty voted for Truman against Dewey. Now, this may be like winning 26 bingo games in a row. I choose to think that it reflected a certain codification
Or else
of
their
values.
perception. I mean, but I
It
just
could
want-
reflect 26 individual convictions for 26 wholly different reasons.
It could.
It could, and indeed it probably did. I don't know.
The original idea of Firing Line was that every week you would debate a left-winger on some subject. Now that has been abandoned over the years. Did you run out of left-wingers or what?
That would be one way to put it. The answer is, of course, that we pursue interesting questions, whether the positions are taken by a left-winger or a right-winger. Mr. Buckley is a graduate of Yale, where he also took a law degree. After practicing a few years, he went into business in New York. His first flyer in politics was as manager of an unsuccessful mayoralty campaign in which his candidate and New York City lost. Professor Milton Friedman is considered by some people the leading economist in the entire world. That in itself is eye-catching, though, come to think of it, somebody has to be the leading economist in the entire world.
I agree that as a moral principle, those of us who pay to provide subsidies for others have every moral right to say what it shall be used for. If we want to say we will give you money only if you use it to buy toothpaste and not for anything else, that's our right. But I think we are very unwise to exercise it. I think we would be wiser and more truly charitable and do both them and ourselves more good.
Tell them to use it to buy National Review.
Tell them to use it to buy, tell them to use it to buy what they will.
Yeah.
John Russell, who is the second-string art critic of the New York Times, began a piece in which he said, "Art and ideas are one." Now, I must give him credit for this. If you ever have a preposterous statement to make, and I offer this as a suggestion to anyone who has something they know to be preposterous, they have to get off, say it in 5 words or less. Because we're always used to 5-word sentences as being the gospel truth.
Bill, it's exactly like falling in love. You see another human being, and for some extraordinary reason, you're in a state of joy and ecstasy over that person. But the driving force which enables you to express that and to bring it into your life is love. Without love, it's nothing, passes. It's the same with seeking reality. And there, the driving force we call faith. It's a very difficult thing to define, actually.
People have asked many times how Mr. Buckley has managed to host a weekly TV show in the face of a pace that would kill a dozen lesser men. The answer, I think all of us know, is he just does things more efficiently than anyone else. He has admitted that he sometimes writes his newspaper column in 20 minutes. How often, reading them, have we said, I didn't realize it took that long to write some of those columns. He writes novels in 8 weeks. He writes magazine essays in 45 minutes. He wrote a children's book on a 2-hour airport layover. In the few minutes I have been speaking, Mr. Buckley has composed a 12,000-line epic poem.
But nevertheless, I do think that the time has now come, at this particular juncture in our history, with all of the pet liberal ideas falling into disrepute due to their failure, for us to make sound and, to use your term, conservative programs exciting because they will work.
Politics, this word, you must use it, consensus, has reared its head. You must have a consensus. It's a word, again, you used not to use when I first came in politics. We had convictions. And we tried to persuade people that our convictions were the right ones. And it's no good having convictions unless you have the will to translate those convictions into action. But politics was more, if you had convictions, than a matter of multiple maneuverings to get through the problems of the day. I often think when you're going for consensus, so often it means that those who believe, as I believe, tend to give in to the left wing, and you steadily move further and further left.
No system of government and no ideology has ever remained unaffected by time. And it would be an extraordinary event if Marxist ideology were to remain unchanged as the only ideology in history. So I believe inevitably the evolution of history will bring about a change in Marxist ideology.
You spent the early part of the evening telling us that we had redundant power, and now the beginning of the second hour telling us that the Soviet Union intends to deploy 700 more missiles. Why do they want 700 more missiles when you just told us how frequently they could kill us with the missiles they now have?
It's really...
Either they are or they aren't useful. Depending on whether it's useful to your argument to say that we shouldn't have any more, you use one argument. Depending on whether it's useful to you to say that there are going to be more, you use a paradoxical argument.
Mr. Buckley, what I'm saying is that in the absence of an agreement, both sides will continue the pattern they followed for years of increasing because of the madness that exists between
I'm not mad.
Well, I would suggest that if not mad, you're at least lacking in vision and common sense.
Well,
it is not.
Senator, I accept that as a question.
Steady work gives one a sense of self-worth, self-respect. You're productive. And I think that carries over into the moral dimension.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, in a more economic sense, contrary to a lot of the declinists like Mr. Galbraith, people may start at relatively modest jobs and incomes, but history, including recent American history, including current American history, shows that they can accumulate knowledge, information, and ultimately wealth by rising. I mean, you have to start someplace.
Whether this debate goes left or right is inconsequential because the world is moving towards democracy, private enterprise, private property, free markets. It's liberating the world. We live in a global economy. We must compete. And the enemy of the poor, Richard, the enemy of the worker, Jerry, the enemy of the consumer, James, the enemy of industry, Lester, is not Mexico or Canada or Japan or Israel or Europe or Asia or Africa. The enemies in Washington, D.C., that have taken the tax policy of this country and raised the cost of labor, raised the cost of capital, suffocated with regulations and tax policy the ability of American industry and American entrepreneurs and American workers to do what they can do best, and that's to be productive.
Now, we have to face the Panamanians in a negotiation not because we've been threatened that they're going to cause trouble, because I say that this is one of the first things that should have called off the negotiations. When they threatened violence, I believe the United States should have said to them, we don't negotiate with anyone under threats. If you want to sit down and talk and
I think that Governor Reagan put his finger on it when he said, the reason this treaty is unpopular is because we're tired of being pushed around. We were pushed out of Vietnam because we didn't have the guts to go in there and do it right, just as Admiral McCain said. We're prepared, as it was said, to desert Taiwan because 3.5 Harvard professors think that we ought to normalize our relations with Red China. We are prepared to allow 16 semi-savage countries to cartelize the oil that is indispensable to the entire industrial might of the West because we don't have a diplomacy that's firm enough to do something about it. And therefore, how do we get our kicks? How do we get our kicks? By saying no to the people of Panama. I say, I say that when I am in a mood to say no, representing the United States, I want to be looking the Soviet Union in the face and say no to the Soviet Union next time it wants to send its tanks running over students who want a little freedom in Czechoslovakia. I want to say no to China when it subsidizes genocide in Cambodia on a scale that has not been known in this century, rather than simply forget that it exists.